Hi. Do you want the chance to win an all-inclusive holiday of a lifetime? 2 weeks to cruise and indulge in complete luxury? Or maybe to drive the car of your dreams? Then I'm afraid you're in the wrong place. This is the Slick Podcast. Keeping it real and always keeping it groovy.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or a very good day to you when and wherever you're listening from, and a very warm welcome to the show. I'm your host, Simon Laurie King, and this is the Slick Podcast.
You have tuned in for a Slick Podcast. I'm here to seek the truth. Live from Scotland around the UK. The one and only Slick Podcast. Enjoy the show. Can I ask important questions? No matter how bizarre the truth might be. Tune in for Slick Podcast. Keeping it real, keeping it groovy.
Coming up on today's show, well, today is quite a strange and weird episode in the fact that I recorded it in my car. Plus, I was privileged enough to be the co-host of the Debra Gets Red Pilled podcast from the good old US of A with Adam and Debra. The reason for me being in my car? Quite simply, my internet signal kept dropping all day, so therefore it was pants. And I really wanted to have this interview because we were talking to Howdie Mickoski. Howdie is an author, a researcher. You can find him on YouTube with Howdie Mickoski Talks. Very, very interesting man. Howdie is the author of The Power of Then, Revealing Egypt's Lost Wisdom, Falling for the Truth, A Spiritual Death and Awakening, and Exposing the Expositions, Ancient Rome in America. I can recommend all of those books, and like I said, check out Howdie's channel. There is just more to this man than I can completely explain. Very interesting man, a very kind man to give his time. He's very, very busy, so he gave myself, Adam and Debra time out of his day to have an interview. My sound quality was pretty rubbish, but Adam's was excellent, Debra's was excellent, and so was Howdie's. But like I say, I was sitting in my car because I really wanted to take part in this interview. But see what you think. Enjoy the episode.
The Slick Podcast. The Slick Podcast. Yeah, it's a Slick Podcast. Truly unforgettable topic. This is Slick Podcast.
All right, guys. Welcome to Debra Gets Red Pilled / the Slick Podcast, episode 38. And I'm not sure what number you're on, Simon, but we're here with our new good friend, Simon Laurie King from the Slick Podcast. He's in Scotland, and he's going to join the show today. And how's it going, man?
It's going very well. Thanks for having me, Adam. How are you today?
I'm doing really well. It's the seasons are changing here in rainy Oregon, and it's going to be a nice, sunny 60-degree Fahrenheit day here. I don't know what that is in Celsius, but it's nicer than it usually is. So,
yeah. But it's kind of rainy, and we're just very early spring here. Very early spring. I have to say, we talk to each other off air. I'm having technical difficulties, and I'm sitting in my car talking to you at the moment. So my signal dropped out, or the sound quality is poor, and I apologize to everybody who's listening. Doing all I can to have this important interview.
Yeah, this is a good one. I've been trying to get it for a long time. So we're going to get Howdie Mickoski on air today to talk about a whole bunch of different stuff with us. And I've been going back and forth with him for probably about 4 or 5 months. And initially he said yes, then he said no. Debra wasn't ready for what he was going to drop on us because it would fracture her little blue-pilled mind too much. And then I just kind of argued. I kind of like in a really respectful way kind of disagreed and argued with him. And he said, well, I'll think about it. contact me again in the future. I think I did, and then didn't hear anything. And then just out of the blue one day, he sent me another podcast saying that he kind of got all his affairs in order, and he would do the podcast with us. But he was so busy that he was going to start teaming people up to do it together, and he thought we'd be a good fit together. So I'm really happy I get to meet you. Why don't you tell my audience a little bit about your show and what you do and what you've done over the years? Your name sounds really familiar to me, and I told your name to my friend, and he said it sounds familiar too. Do we know you from somewhere else?
When people say that to me, I worry. I mean, I don't owe you money, do I?
No, you might just have one of those super, I don't want to say British, but Scottish.
Yeah,
sounding, Scottish sounding names.
Well, the accent isn't Scottish. My father was from Ballachulish in the north of Scotland, and my grandparents were, and I was brought up in the southern counties of England. But when people ask me where I'm from, I live in Scotland. I'm very fortunate to live in Scotland. I love Scotland and I love the people. But really, I'm just from I know it sounds pretty 1960s, but that's where I'm at. As far as the podcast goes, probably the same as you, Adam. I like talking to people. I like interesting people. I like reading books. And I haven't got as many episodes as you. I enjoy your podcast. I just like talking to interesting people. So I'm not the conspiracy guy, and I'm not the ancient aliens guy. I just like talking to interesting people. I think that would sum me up.
Yeah. So I listened to yesterday, and it was a long episode. I listened to your episode with Jared Murphy, who is the author of, what's the name of his book? It's not Aliens, it's Us.
Worse, it's Us. Yeah, discovering
our.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant guy. I dropped him your email. I totally recommend having Jared. He's a really nice guy, really interesting, and he did me a real favor because that kicked off my podcasting career. He did me a real favor, and I'm very grateful to him. But he's a really, really nice man. I mean, everybody I've had on my show, really interesting people.
Yeah. He seems to know a lot of stuff. There was so much information in that episode. It was long, so it was like hard to keep up with. But he emailed me right after you gave him my info.
Great.
And I said, let me get a little bit more familiar with your work, and then we'll get him on sometime in the future. So
yeah, I think that's important that you either read the book. I certainly do. I read the books of the people, or see them on Wikipedia. Just get as much information about the people as I can, because I'm interested in those people. So rather than struggle for a question, you have something to fire straight away. And you and I have both agreed that we're very lucky to talk to Howdie Mickoski. There's probably more questions than there are time. Do you not think?
Yeah, because he's an expert on so many different things. Like I said, I haven't known about him for that long, but I heard his interview on Crow 777, and about, I think he called it whitewashing history, and it had to do with just the fact that there was these ancient or old buildings, and they just painted them and fixed them up again and passed them off as new. And from there, I went and I got his book. I'm reading it right now, Exposing the Expositions. I found his other podcasts. I listened to him on Freeman Fly and on my friend Lindsay from Rogueways podcast. And she's a really good podcaster and really amazing person. So check her out too. But
I will do.
The thing that we just did a really good episode with her. Listen to that one. She talks about everything from the Genesis 6 conspiracy and Gary Wayne, and all the way into tarot cards and stuff like that. So, but what struck me about that episode, it really hit me really hard, was, I've kind of been on the fringes of looking into all this Tartaria stuff, but it's really hard to find a place to jump in and familiarize yourself with it, just because there's so much information and so many different aspects to it. And the way that he approached it was through talking about these buildings and being a construction guy, it really resonated and made sense to me and blew my mind. So, what is your history with knowing about him, and why did you want to reach out to him?
I think all of the above. Circumstance or fate. I came across one of his podcasts or interviews, the very same one actually, Adam, as you did, Crow 777, and I thought to myself, this is a really interesting guy. And same thing, I reached out to him, and I think I had like one episode. I might not even had any episodes on at the time, so I was punching well above my weight by asking him, and fortune obviously smiled upon me. And a few weeks ago, the same as you, he said, teaming people up, and I'm really glad that I got to, because having listened to some of your podcasts, which I can definitely recommend, and I'll put a link to your podcast on my show notes. So that was that. But let me ask you, because I wanted to ask you this before we get on with before we buzz Howdie, what brought you to the world of podcasting?
I'm a huge fan of podcasts, and like I said, I'm a construction worker. I build elevators. I'm a union elevator constructor, and I'm not on big gigantic job sites that much anymore. I tend to work with only one other person, and I'm able to like kind of just sit in the hoistway and listen to headphones all day. I love podcasts. It kind of replaced TV for me in the past 5 years, and I think it's just really broadened my mind and exposed me to stuff that I don't think I would ever be thinking about if it hadn't been for that. And I'm kind of a lone wolf, a loner by nature, and I have a couple really good friends most of the time, and that's about it. And I spend a lot of time by myself, so I don't get to talk about a lot of my feelings and what I think about the world. And I'm 41 years old, and I got to the point where it's like, hey man, maybe I have something to say. I think I can contribute to the world, and I kind of want to get it out there. So that's a great answer. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
I just went for it, and I'm glad I came up with my little scheme for a podcast, which is trying to red pill my totally blue pilled mother-in-law. And because there's a ton of podcasts where it's 2 or 3 different people just sitting in a room talking about stuff, agreeing with each other. So
that's a great premise. I like that. And when I looked at your podcast, I thought, wow, it's not I'm trying to think of a word. It's not a gimmick. It really is an excellent angle to come from. And listening to what Debra has to say, that's pure gold. I like it. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah. Well, same question right back at you. How'd you get started?
Shouting at other podcasters, basically, because I was listening to Jared Murphy and shouting. That's the right choice of words. I was listening to an interview with Jared Murphy, and he will tell you about a sunken city off the coast of Cuba. And he said this to an interview. It wasn't a bad interview, but he said this to an interview. It had been above water. This was like 50,000 years ago. So then I bought Jared's book, Still Feeling Frustrated. Why didn't the interviewer pick up on that? That was just such an important thing. So I just thought, okay, I'm just going to start my own podcast, get hold of Jared and ask him about that very thing. And the rest is history.
Hello.
Hey, we're recording. Debra. We're recording, Debra.
I tried to get in.
Yeah, I was just waiting because I was spitting pure fire and I didn't want to interrupt what was going on. So,
well, I was
and
waiting.
Like what you're doing to Simon right now. He's on a roll and you just interrupted.
Oh.
No, not at all. Debra, good afternoon from the UK. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you? I apologize, but...
No, absolutely not. You've got nothing to apologize about. I couldn't think of anybody more that I would want to interrupt me. An absolute pleasure to finally get to meet you.
Well, thank you.
Simon, that's Debra. Simon is in Scotland.
Uh-huh.
And he sent me a video of where he lives, and he's got looks like he's got a little piece of land, and he's got 15 chickens,
Oh, wow.
and yeah, so
Simon,
We've got a lot in common.
you're going to make Adam want to move to Scotland now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, Jared's going to be on his way. He's going to visit us soon. If you guys come to Scotland, come stay with us, and we can chew the fat. And I'm not talking about my wife's cooking now, though that kind of does ring similar.
Yeah. Well, we got the introductions out of the way, guys. Howdie is in the waiting room. Should we pause and let him in?
Let's go for it.
All right. We'll pause it right here, and we'll be back in a minute, guys. Hold on. All right, guys. We're back with our honored guest for the day, Howdie Mickoski. How are you doing?
I am actually quite tired. For those who've been following me, I've moved to a farm like about a month ago, and once you make that change from city living to farm living, you kind of have something to do all the time. So my body is not used to yet to the new rhythm, so I notice I get tired much more quickly.
And you are in Norway?
Yeah.
How many?
And where it has just been snowing heavily for like a week, so it's been also digging out of a lot of shoveling. So that's how I'm doing.
Do you have animals on the farm yet?
Yeah, there's it's sort of like an ecological farm. So there's a number of different people here. So it's not just us, but yeah, there's sheep and chickens and goats and horses and.
Cool. So kind of like an intentional community commune situation.
Yeah, and hopefully we're going to be doing really well with food preparation and really getting ready for the winter, because things might be very different in 6 months than they are now.
Yeah, that's what we're all.
We can talk about all that if you want as we go along.
Yeah. Well, Simon's in Scotland, so a lot closer to you, and he kind of lives on a little piece of land too. I've got a normal sized American backyard with chickens and a garden, but we're looking to upgrade to a little bit more land, downsize the house and upgrade to more land. So we're talking to a realtor later this afternoon after we're done here. So, hey Simon, you want to start asking questions, or how should we do it?
Yeah, absolutely. It seems to be a common theme between us all with the countryside. Yeah, you're right. We live in Scotland. We've had our own pigs. We have chicken. I think it's definitely the way forward. So I'll start with the first question, if everybody's okay with that.
Everyone's fine.
Howdie,
Yes.
On your website, EgyptianWisdomRevealed.com, you explained that as a young man of 28, whilst watching a television program about ancient Egypt, you had a revelation almost. You decided to seek the truth and answers about this ancient culture for yourself, rather than continue to sit, watch, and be told them. What was it that resonated with you about that at that particular time in your life?
Okay, yeah, we can start there. This he's talking about an experience that happened to me when I was 28 years old. I had a pretty decent high school sort of teenage life, fairly popular and an athlete and enjoying my life. But at the same time, I had some difficulties. I had a father who was a psychopath and eventually stole most of my money from me when I was just finishing university. So I had this very difficult experience. And then an ex-girlfriend was murdered in 1994. So I had these these challenges already, Simon and Debra, with kind of the dealing with reality and dealing with the presentation that if you're just a nice person and you follow the steps, everything will work out for you. Life was showing me that that's not really true. And when I got to be 28 years old, I was in a really deep depression, like it's like really deep, to the point that I wanted to kill myself. I just couldn't come up with a good way to do it that wouldn't be messy for anybody finding the body. And in the midst of this depression, on my birthday, I think it was my birthday or the day after my birthday, something like that, I was back visiting my mother, and I was turning on channels at 8 o'clock in the evening, and there was a program on from Nova on pyramid building. And what's interesting is now, of course, I would say everything in that video is some form of incorrect falsehood or lie, but I still hold a great honor to the program because it changed my life. When I watched that program, the best way I can describe it, Simon, is it was like a lightning bolt of insight that said to me, this is what you have to do with your life. You have to learn what the ancients understood, and you have to prepare yourself for when you finally get into the pyramids of Egypt, things will be revealed to you. That's the best way I can present it. But from that initial spark was an almost obsessive like life after that point, in which anywhere I thought I could get a true answer to what the ancients knew, that's where I would go. And that led to me, meeting native Indian medicine men and spending time with them, and a Zen teacher from Korea and Qigong teachers from China, and people from all over the world. But it was, the best way to describe it was like this lightning bolt that ended the depression instantaneously, and went from, I'm sure all of us have had depression. So when you're depressed, you have no energy. You're it's hard to even get out of bed. I went from the next day to having energy where I could read 10 books a day. So
Wow.
This was the change in my life that happened.
Thank you.
Can I?
Yeah.
I'll ask a follow-up for that one. Before this divine inspiration, if that's what you'd refer to it as, that's what I'd call it. Did you have any interest in archaeology or Egypt or Indiana Jones or anything like that?
Good question. I went to university as a historian.
Me
I
too.
have my degree. Yeah. Which of course seems stupid now when
Yeah.
we'll talk about the world fairs and stuff later on, when I'm like, why wasn't I asking the questions I'm asking now when I was in school? Why wasn't I thinking? I still had an overly questioning mind, but I believed a lot of whatever story was presented. But my historical interest was, say, in the last 500 years. So I really hadn't studied anything of ancient Egypt. I really hadn't studied the Mayans or the Peruvians. I had been interested in smaller, what you might call, I don't call them a cult. That's not the right word. I guess you call it mysteries of the world. So I had read stuff on the Bermuda Triangle. I had read some things on Sasquatch. I had read some books on the Roswell thing, but nothing. It was more like almost like interest reading, not like research. And then when this event happened, we'll call it an event, everything changed. It's like my life just flipped 180 degrees.
Yeah, got it. Yeah. What do you think, Simon? Should we keep going on this, or do you got another one?
Well, Deborah, have you got a question for Howdie on that?
Well, I'm really interested in the exposition.
We're not there yet.
I know, so I'm holding off.
Okay.
Well, if I could ask one more question about your early life, Howdie, if you don't mind.
Please do.
Okay. The title of one of your books, "Falling for the Truth," and that is quite literally what happened to you. An incident that very nearly ended your life, as I understand it. But as it turned out, it was that very thing which could be described as a reset through near death, an event that set you upon a new path. Could you maybe elaborate on that event, please? Which I think was in Johnston Canyon in a river.
Yeah, it's these are actually, we're already here. 2 questions, and we have good questions right off the bat. I like this.
I hope that's okay with you, me asking about that.
You can ask anything you want. If
Thank
for
you,
some
Howdie.
reason down the road, I think I don't want to answer it, I'll just skirt it, but please ask anything you want.
Well played.
Yeah.
Well played.
Yeah, so I had done like 7 years or so, because the first event we talked about was 1997, and then the question Simon was asking me about the falling in the river in the canyon was 2004. So in between that period, I had done I'd researched and read 200 or 300 books. I had all the meetings with these teachers around the world. I had done tremendous amount of inner work. I had done exercise to the point of obsession. Reading Castaneda's books and doing what was in the books, and I sort of thought I knew something. I thought as this period was winding down, and I had just done 3 or 4 months research tour in Egypt, I thought, yeah, I know something now. I'm pretty smart. I've got a good knowledge of the world. And then, being like the tarot fool, I slipped and fell into a canyon, into a river in this canyon that was flowing far too hard for me to realize that if you fall in, you don't get out. And it was in that moment of being in the river and attempting to swim against the current and get to the shore, because I was right at the edge of where one of Canada's largest waterfalls is. So I was like 5 seconds from going over the waterfall. And in that moment, the best way I can describe it was a complete acceptance that this was where I was going to die, that this was the moment of my death and this is how it was going to be. And it was laughable, actually, to think that of all the ways I could die, it was going to be this way. This is the way it was going to happen for me. And it was fine. I had no need to struggle. I had no need to continue living. Best way I can describe it is like I was going to die and I had front row seats to watch it. That's the best way to describe it. But once I had made that acceptance of that I would be dead, that death would happen, my mind just stopped. And not just my mind, everything that I would classify as me stopped. My entire personality, the memories, the fears, the hopes, the dreams, the experiences, everything, every single thing vanished. It was gone. And I knew in the vanishing point in that moment that none of it was real. It was everything I'd ever thought of as me was a fiction, was a made up story. I had worked in the past 7 years of digging through reality. We can talk about that and the experiences I did to test reality. But this, you never really test yourself. How real am I? And this experience showed that none of it was real. But there was still a witnessing going on. There was still an awareness, and then what I could call, how to describe it, Simon? Clusters of thought, or clusters of information, like that would come up, and they would come up into my mind or into my mind's eye, and then they would explode almost like a diamond, and all this information would be instantaneously known, and then the next like thought bubble would come up, and but it wasn't coming from my mind. It wasn't coming from anything I'd ever known before, but everything that came up in these thought bubbles I knew was true. It was complete information. I mean, this is all happening in like a span of 1 second, right? I'm in there. I know I'm going to die. And in 1 second, all of these things are happening. At the same time, I got what I would classify as a download from the universe. That's the only way I can describe it. It's like the universe plugged in, what do they call the things? A stick, right? That you put in your computer. It's like the universe put a stick in my head and downloaded the stick into my mind while all this was going on. So just as the download happened, I had a friend who had also fallen in. So it wasn't just me who had fallen in. 2 of us had fallen into this canyon. And all of a sudden I had a thought, and the thought was that then, and this was again one of these thought bubbles, not my thought bubble. If I don't get out, how is my friend going to get out? And at that moment, I slammed my leg slammed into an underwater boulder. There was a big enough rock that my leg, because I was kind of not flat on the surface this time, I was kind of angled a bit. I was sort of upright a bit in the water. I kind of given up trying to fight the current, but I hit this boulder and veered off a bit to the side where I could actually touch a little bit of the ground of the river and managed to crawl out. And just as I was crawling out, I noticed that my friend was crawling out. And then we just sat there for about an hour and didn't say much for a while, and then shared our experiences and realized we had almost identical experiences. And that led, like you say, Simon, to a completely different direction where I then had to go back to everything I'd learned in the past 7 or 8 years and re-question, does that still fit as true given the new presentation that I was given in this very challenging experience?
Wow.
Wouldn't it be great to be able to have that experience without being in a near-death experience?
Well, if once you begin to learn the ancient world, I mean, it can't happen without the death experience, because as long as the egoic self is still in control, it's still running the show, there's never a chance of reaching this. I don't like to call it beyond it, but sort of prior to everything we think we are. And so much of what the ancient Egyptians or the Toltecs or the Maya or the ancient early Hindus or whatever, they involve death practices. The idea, it's like the quote by Bunyan, which is die while you're alive, then be completely dead, and then do whatever you want. It's all good. Because once you have crossed the line for death and gone to the other side of it and returned, you have gained a certain knowledge that you can't get without that crossing. Unfortunately, some will make the crossing and not come back. And in the ancient world, they lost a number of initiates, you might say, by not going over. But is it okay to tell another story?
Yeah.
Is it okay, please? One of the shamans that I had met, just because it has a similar ring to this. One of the shamans I met was a guy from Brazil. His name was Roberto, and Roberto told me that when he was training to be he had no interest in being a medicine man, but his grandfather was had been a medicine man in the tribe for a long time. And when he felt it was his time, he walked Roberto to a cave without telling him what was going to do. They walked into this cave into what was like a giant pool of water. And without knowing, he pushed him in, just pushed him in the pool, in this dark cave. And every time Roberto tried to get out, because he realized there's crocodiles in there, there's alligators, there's snakes, whatever. And every time he tried to crawl out, the grandfather would push him back in. And eventually the crocodile started bumping, or an alligator or something, started bumping against him. And something similar, Roberto knew, I'm going to die. I'm going to die in here, And then he had a thought. He remembered that when he was young, he had thrown some rocks at a crocodile he had seen, just in a mean, boyful kind of way. And he thought, well, if I'm going to die anyway, I might as well apologize to the crocodile I have here for what I did when I was 8 years old. And when he did that, he felt that the crocodile, or whatever, alligator, started having a conversation with him. And he said he began having this detailed thing, and eventually the crocodile kind of forgave him for his experience and went away. And he said this happened continuously. Every single creature that was in that pool would swim over to him, bump into him. They would have this kind of conversation where he either had to apologize for something in his past or simply just wish the thing well. And once he had made it through all of these interactions, his grandfather took him out and he was ready for the next step. So again, it's this idea of putting you in this state close to death, or having the universe do it for you, opens a certain doorway that doesn't seem to be, or that's very hard to open without that moment. Let's put it that way.
Debra, have you ever had a near-death experience?
No, I have not.
No.
Have you, Adam?
I've been in some pretty bad motorcycle crashes, and I can talk to, how everything slows down, and like it's just typical what they say, your life kind of flashes before your eyes. Unfortunately, at the times that they happened, I don't think my mind was really open to, I wasn't really open to new information as much as Howard might have been when he had his experience. I had one really bad one, and it changed my life exponentially for good, because it caused me to get clean and sober. But
great.
And that's kind of what started my journey down the path of where I am now. That was 9 years ago, and I wouldn't be where I am now without that. So I have that one.
Yeah, another perfect example. Every time, people are so afraid of death. We're taught to be frightened of it. But if we learn to some way start to make friends with it, and that goes right back to my time when Joan died. Once I learned how to make friends with the experience of her murder, and learn how to speak with her and interact with her and remove my own guilt, because I carried a lot of guilt over her death. And once that began to be released, like you say, things can open. So learning to befriend death is a real big step in getting to know the deeper parts of yourself one way or another. Do you agree, Simon?
Yeah, I was absolutely captivated by that. Absolutely. I mean, that was just so amazing to face the basic truth. To me, the only certainty is death. I mean, death and taxes, that's plagiarism, but the only truth is death. And I suppose if we try and approach the universe for truth in any other way but sincerity, and certainly when you're in that river, and it seems to me you were completely at peace. I don't know that you were thrashing around and you were panicking, but to me, it seems you were completely at peace. And then the universe decided, well, this guy is completely at peace, so we'll reveal that truth. And I've just been captivated. I really don't know what I really don't know what to say. That was just amazing. And I really, really appreciate you sharing that, because that was just, yeah. I don't, over to you, Adam.
Go ahead. What was that, Simon?
I'm just saying that was just an amazing. I suppose it's underselling it, saying it was a story. The account, that was just amazing. I really haven't got words to describe. Yeah, and unless you've been in that situation, which thankfully I haven't. I suppose the nearest I've ever been to that would be coming into this life, but I was far too young as a baby to remember my birth. But I think that's probably about the only, for those of us who haven't experienced near death, and hopefully I won't until my time is up, that's about the only nearest I could probably come to, but I can't remember. I was too young. If you get where I'm coming from, Howdie.
Yeah. The challenge, though, comes after the experience is over. And I'll share that with you guys too, because that's actually more important. And one of the reasons I finally started talking about this many years ago was because I was hoping people would avoid the mistakes that I made. And that is, when you come out of something like this, the first thing you come out with is unbelievable clarity. I mean, for like 6 months, I was beyond clear. And I could actually manifest life. I could literally just think of something and it would happen. You know, I wouldn't have to do anything. I would just think about it and it would happen. And the problem is that usually if you go through an experience like I just described, which is a true awakening, if you want to call it that, the problem is that if you think of it like a holographic plate, the universe has shone a light on one part of the plate, and it shone that part strong and bright and full. Because it's a hologram, of course, you've seen the whole, but the whole, you've seen the rest fuzzy, but you think you've seen it clearly. I thought I understood the whole thing when I really only understood properly one piece of it. And that means the first thing you would have to do after something like this is basically cave in for about 6 or 7 months, because there's now been such a change into who you think you are, who you thought you were, what the world is. In a sense, what's happened is the personality has been ripped apart and destroyed, and now the person has to make a decision. Like, I needed to make a decision then. Do I want to just be a hermit and like live in the woods by myself? Then I don't have to do anything. I just go in the woods and get some goats and some chickens and live by myself. If I want to rejoin the world again, you have to have a personality. And if you don't have a personality, the world's going to have a real difficult time dealing with you, because the people don't know how to deal with non-people. And so if you don't choose and make the personality yourself, it's going to be made for you. And generally what gets made for you is not that positive. So I went through a tremendous period of mess, which led to illness, which led to a lot of years of sickness, of mistakes, of just doing things always with a really good intention. But again, because things hadn't been built properly and I hadn't taken the time to integrate, that's the word, to integrate what this had happened and how to deal with it, you can have years of mistakes. So something that should maybe take 2 or 3 years at the most, I'm 15 years in and I'm maybe just starting to get it now. So that's a big part of all this is learning how to take the time to integrate it. And of course, when this happened to me, even though it was 2005, not that long ago, there was almost nothing written about it. There was almost nothing, people having, videos and talks and lectures. This part of it was just ignored because the people who I think had it just learned to keep their mouth shut. And so whenever I went to various spiritual wherevers, nobody could relate really to what I was talking about, so I couldn't get any information. So that's the back end of all this, that for a while everything looks great, but then all of a sudden it'll start to curve, it'll start to flatten out on you again, and you have to use that time to be prepared for when that does happen, which I didn't.
And what would you have done differently in order to prepare yourself?
Yeah, I would have just stayed mostly still for about at least 3 months. I went right back into the world. Like about a month later or 2 months later, I was on a plane. I was flying here to Norway, and I had lectures going on, and I was meeting people, and it was just too soon. And if I would have taken just the time to be still I would have spent more. I would have gone back to a particular medicine man, Bruce Starlight. I would have gone back to his sweat lodges and just kind of just sat in the sweat lodge for week after week after week, not really doing or saying much, just being open to learn again. But again, you get fooled, Deborah, because in the clarity, which part of it was true clarity, the other part of it you might call a false clarity, but it's a spiritual ego that's forming because you think, well, I know everything now. And that's what I would have changed differently. I would have just sat still and tried to really work into myself. How much do I really know now, and how much am I still in the dark about? Yeah.
I was wondering if you. Oh, go ahead, Simon.
Yeah.
Oh, I would just had a thought in my head. Thank you, Deborah. The last question on that I'll ask you about your experience. Are you moving forward now with your life and everything that you do to honor that complete privilege that happened to you in that river, almost looking through the meaning of life? Is that what you're doing? Are you now honoring that experience with all of your being?
No. I wish I was, and I hope that will be the eventual result. At times, yeah, I've allowed life to get hard. And again, it's choices that were made right back from this early period that took me on a direction that I'm still in the process of, what's the word I'm looking for? Clarifying where I am and what needs to be done. But certainly the experience came out, or it finally, because the book that you're talking about, Falling for Truth, it took me about 8 or 9 years to write it. And it finally got published in 2019. It took quite a while for the TAT Foundation to, and they were right, they needed more work to present it in the right way. But that was the first sort of release of this pent-up energy that had kind of been holding. And at the same time, that's when I started writing this book on the World's Fairs, where again, this was a lightning bolt moment of why I should look into these fairs and what they are. And so that book, as odd as I would say it, that book would be closer to what you just asked, Simon, in that I'm doing something that seems like might have been part of this download I described, where like a lot of information about something just got stuck into my head. And it's like, now I have to just start trusting what wants to come out, even though it seems strange or odd at the surface. But by bringing it out, it'll have the right effect because it's part of that experience. So I think I'm starting to slowly get more of a handle of what you might say is supposed to be life now, but it's still a work in progress.
It would seem that everything that we're exposed to daily, the meeting people or just doing whatever it is that you have to do to get through life, that everybody that would make it difficult.
Yeah, especially the more you start to know that life is a dream on one level, that life is a potentially some sort of weird experiment, some sort of, Gnostic creation mistake. You start adding the layers of that this reality is obviously controlled in some way and manipulated, and that our perception is constantly being worked on. All of these things do make it harder as you go along to just interact with people. If you just want to say, what's the weather tomorrow, it's not a big deal. But as soon as you have any kind of conversation about anything, it starts to get very hard to play the game and play along with people. And so that does make it hard for me sometimes to hear. It's easy, right? People are saying, we're interviewing you. We want to hear what you have to say. So just say it. But once I go back into the world with people like out there, it gets challenging because I have to decide, is this someone I should talk to, or is this someone I should keep my mouth shut and just what's the thing? Don't cast pearls before the swine or something. Yeah,
something
that
like
kind of
that.
thinking.
Yeah, I've come to it's kind of a bummer, but piggybacking on what you just said, I'm going to talk to my parents about the weather for the rest of my life, and that's about it. It's a bummer, but I wish they were more like Debra and, maybe don't believe anything I have to say, but at least willing to hear it, or interested,
Right.
and they're not. So it's sad for me. I try to pretend like it doesn't affect me that much, but like at this point I have a lot of like anger and rage towards them instead of like love and compassion. So that's something I need to work on as well.
Was that there more, like you say, this accident that you had, was this more the sort of the anger, was that there before the accident, or is this more sort of the change you've went through and the way you interact with them different now that's sort of created the anger?
I think I used to be, I still am, I'm a hopeless alcoholic, and I've done things in the past 9 years to make it so I know how to deal with things better and interact with the world in a way that's less destructive. And I think when I was that way for so long, I got sober when I was 32 and I started drinking heavily when I was 15, and I think my parents just treated me like I was 15 the whole time, and I don't think they'll ever be able to get out of that mindset towards me. And I don't think while I was drinking, before I had that come to God moment of crashing a motorcycle at 75 miles an hour on the freeway, that I don't think, I lost my train of thought, but I think that it was easier for them to kind of keep me to interact with me because I wasn't thinking freely for myself, maybe, and I don't know if that makes any sense to anybody, but I've got some pretty wild out there ideas that most people aren't open to. So I think everybody on the panel probably knows how that feels, and it's just
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's just hard to see people that you love, especially nowadays. Everybody in my family is full on board with everything that's going on out in the world right now, and it's just a bummer to see people that you thought were intelligent free thinkers. I mean, you just got to kind of resign to the fact that you got fooled, and they weren't ever that.
Simon?
Right. So my next question, if that's okay for everybody. I live in Scotland, and we are surrounded by many ancient standing stones, cairns, burial mounds, etc. If you know where to look for them. I've personally taken great interest in these, as well as the most well-known in Britain, that of Stonehenge. Most people around the world have heard of that. You have suggested in one of your video presentations on YouTube that these particular stones were disassembled and possibly taken away and returned, and subsequently suffered huge energy loss. Could you briefly talk a little on that and maybe guess as to why?
Okay. So one of the things, along with parts of the ancient world that I began to be interested in was stone circles, specifically standing stones as well. And now that I live in Scandinavia, I mean, there's hundreds of them here, and I have a wonderful opportunity to really work with them here because the local populations aren't interested. They stay away from them. So when I go to a stone circle here in Norway or even in Sweden, it's just me. There's nobody there. Mm-hmm. But when you think of what a stone circle is, or what any of these sites are, of course, most people are aware of things like energy lines that run on the earth. And you can think of these sites and these ancient stones as ancient acupuncture needles placed on the meridians of the earth. So just the way an acupuncturist will put a certain needle in a certain part of your body in order to correct something somewhere else, a lot of what these stones are in the earth are doing something similar. They're working like same way acupuncture needles work. So they're working with energy in the spot, the area. Now, when it came to Stonehenge, I of course have been really looking forward to seeing Stonehenge finally. I was going to see Stonehenge in Avebury. That was in 2010. Really looking forward to it. I first went to Stonehenge, and Stonehenge was like dead. The site was there was the most minor feeling of energy at Stonehenge. It was just, and I thought, well, maybe it's just all the people that come. Maybe it's, I mean, I didn't have an answer at the beginning. I went to Avebury the next day, and when I was at Avebury, it was like my legs were on fire. Wherever I stood, it was like I was burning up. There was so much energy at Avebury. So I knew it was something about Stonehenge, and it couldn't just be the people. A couple of years later, I first ran into it on a Russian website. So at that time, there were some really good Russian researchers that dug into historical things, actually before people in the West did. And they revealed about 200 photographs taken in 1953 from Stonehenge. And what had happened was they claimed they were doing a archaeological dig. They dug up every single stone. There are pictures of them being put onto flatbed trucks. They were obviously taken off site. I don't know where they were taken. The site was dug up, whatever they did to look for them. Then we can say stones were brought back. Of course, I can't verify that it was the same stones that they took away. And then the stones, as they are now, are cemented in place in the earth. So first of all, you've got the entire site was disturbed. All the stones were removed. The stones, let's even assume they are the original stones, which we don't know. They might be in, some rich person's underground chamber, and these are just replacement stones. We have no idea. But the stones that are there are cemented in place, which almost for sure stops the energy transmission between the earth, the stone, and the sky. So all of a sudden, we've taken a site that is potentially jacked with energy, and now it made sense as to why I didn't feel it, as to what, because the site is totally disturbed. Now, why would they do something like that? That's a really good question, because I'm assuming, Simon, you've been to Stonehenge, right? I would assume.
A number of disappointing times, Howdie. Yes.
Yeah. So when you walk from the car park, you go actually under, or used to then, you go under the roadway, sort of like this weird,
right. Mm-hmm.
And there's all of these doors, first of all, on this in this area, and I know they're not closets for mops and stuff. They're doors that are leading to, what I realized very quickly must be a giant underground facility, that the stones on top are just a small part of the whole area, that there must be another underground, similar like Giza or the sites in Egypt, where you have these like an underground city. And so my guess is the change to the stones on top were done to make a change to the environment of the underground tunnel area underneath Stonehenge, and that probably some sort of ritual or some sort of something is still going on down there, and the energy of the stones at the top was getting in the way of whatever the we'll call them, the people who are probably in power and controlling this place want to do underground. That would be I can't prove that would be a reason, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was a reason for this change.
So taking it apart would be to disable it instead of diverting it.
Right. Like I learned, because one way I learned how to work with stone circles is the same way I was taught to work with Native Indian medicine wheels, which are quite simply the same thing. Just the medicine wheel has smaller stones and usually has more spokes and things in the middle. But the first thing you would do with a medicine wheel is you would walk clockwise around the medicine wheel, in a sense, with the sun, to turn the circle on, to turn the wheel on, to say that you're there to join it. And then when you were done, you would walk counterclockwise, so that in a sense you're closing out your day with the circle, and the medicine wheel is complete, and it kind of can go back to sleep. And one of the weirdest things I noticed when I went to Stonehenge is when you walk as a visitor, because I've also gone at the nighttime, where you go and you have access to the stones completely, but during the day the site is roped off. And when you go with the crowd, the pathway funnels people to walk counterclockwise around Stonehenge. So I realized right away, as soon as we got there, that there's 3,000 people, and they're all walking counterclockwise to see Stonehenge, which in my medicine wheel understanding is turning it off. And so with the friend I was with, right away I said, we're walking clockwise, we're going to do this properly. And when I finished walking around Stonehenge properly, it was really weird, because I actually turned my head, because I thought somebody behind me had said it. I just heard, "Thank you."
Oh,
It was like, because I was like the first person probably in days that had walked around the circle with the idea of turning the energy on. So all of these layers of pieces are all fit into what's going on at these sites and what's not going on at these sites.
On your site, sorry, on the YouTube video, there are pictures about Stonehenge, and I took a few screenshots. And two that spring to mind is one where former President Barack Obama is standing by. I think it's one of the stones which make up the trilithon, and it looks like I think they've said it's a repair to a stone, but that is not a repair. If you look at it, as far as I'm concerned, it looks almost like a dental implant when you put the raw plug in, and then you would screw the tooth on top of it. And the second picture, I think I actually sent it back to you with a exclamation mark. It looks to me like a barrel in a sling and two gentlemen with Geiger counters. Both pictures question why.
Right. Yeah, I mean the Barack Obama photo is so interesting because when you look at it, and it looks metallic, and when I was at Stonehenge, I didn't know about that stone, so I didn't look at it closely enough to see if it had been covered or it was not covered. But it looks metallic, so like you say, it almost looks like it's like a metal interior that they've layered like a stone exterior over top of it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So, is that just that one stone then? Is it all of them? Is it some of them? Not all. Like now, and maybe that's why they really don't like people getting close to them anymore. Why they keep the people on the way with ropes, because they don't want people getting too close and started maybe banging enough times on them to hear a metallic hollow sound or something. As for the So I mean, that to me, that's really weird. It's really weird that they allowed that picture to get out. That they could have easily held that photo back and made sure that didn't get out. So somehow somebody said, we want to see if the morons out there are going to catch this kind of thing. And then you've got with these pictures, these other photos. There's the one I saw was this Russian site. They had like 200 or 300 of these photographs. And it's so many of them are strange because you can see they're doing like experiments on the site. They're like scientist geek-like people, but it's hard to know what kind of experiment they're doing and what kind of equipment they're using and what actually are they doing there. And so the simplest answer I have is if you live in England or you live in that part of England, then you have to go to Avebury. Use your time, go to Avebury where the energy is still clear and complete. Avebury is wonderful because it's very similar to the Ohio Serpent Mound in that it's actually a gigantic serpent that runs along the ground. The main circle is like in the middle, almost like the belly, and then it continues to where the serpent will eat an egg, the cosmic egg. So if you go when you're at Avebury, like I walk like half a mile or something to the initial start of it, and you walk the whole thing. You walk the entire sort of line of a row of these stones as you sort of wind your way up to the main circle. By the time you get after this long walk, that's why I'm just filled with energy. It's that primal energy is being activated by you might. And what was also interesting, Simon, because you might get a chance to go see this before any of us, is when you walk along those stones on the what I call the roadway or the avenue, many of them are carved in very unique ways that perfectly would fit your body to lean into or sit on or lean against or put your hand in or put your hand on. And I realized that also it's not just you're supposed to walk this, you're supposed to walk it for like a long period of time and take moments with each stone, that each stone has a particular way you connect with it, with either your shoulder or your back, or you sit there or whatever. And so it becomes like this gigantic interactive experience between you and the stones before you even reach the main circle.
Why do you suppose that Stonehenge essentially has been as you describe it, kind of turned off, and Avebury and these other ones have been left alone to do what they're supposed to do?
I have no idea. I do know though that, and again, maybe Simon knows this for sure. Isn't there a very specific British military base very near Stonehenge?
Salisbury Plain.
Yeah.
Plain. The firing range. Because I walked the whole country with a horse and cart in 2003. One of my missions was to take in as many stone circles and things as I could. But when I got to Salisbury Plain, you can't. And there is so much Neolithic history which you can't go. It's a firing range, but basically, the answer is yes. But Stonehenge, fun fact, as far as I know, is the only stone circle in all of Britain which you have to pay for the privilege to go and see. And as Howdie has pointed out, there's really, it's very dormant at best to say, at worst, nothing.
Yeah.
Was there ever any explanation given why they disassembled Stonehenge?
No, I think when you dig into it, it's more like the standard archaeological dig, or they wanted to learn more about the ancient past or how its building techniques, or the standard. But it's really weird that, normally when you do an excavation of something like that, you excavate a small area, or you might excavate one stone. You might take one stone out and just out of your curiosity, see what's under it, learn about the stone. I've never heard of them dismantling an entire site, moving it away, doing something, and then moving it back, other than those sites in Egypt that they moved because of the Aswan Dam. And so they were, the sites got flooded, and so they literally had to move them. I've never heard of anything like this anywhere else ever. So something is really strange with Stonehenge. Yeah.
Well, we don't have any kind of really reference to it if you've never been there living in America. So what I really want to do is go check out the stuff in Ohio, the mounds in Ohio, to kind of get the American version of it. And I'm glad I don't have to add Stonehenge or the places to visit.
The United States has lots of great sites. The United States has pyramids. The United States has, all sorts of interesting mounds, all sorts of really ancient buildings. And there's lots to see in the United States. If a person just decides, I'm going to get in my car and I'm going to stay within like a 2-hour driving distance from anywhere, no matter where you are, you're going to find stuff to examine. Guaranteed. It's just history has tried to cover it over and tell people there's nothing to see. There's lots. Simon,
do you want to keep going? Do you want to get into expos at all?
I know Debra would love to start talking about the expositions, if that's okay with you and Howdie.
Sure.
Yeah, that's perfect. I think
it's probably a good segue where we are right now. So let's switch over to some talk about that.
Yeah. Did you have anything specific, Debra? I've got some stuff written down. I've got some requests from fans of the show too. So
I just, I'm curious. As I watched the video about the St. Louis and New Orleans expos in 1868 and 1888 in that part of, that's not our distant past, that's recent. And there's photographs of those structures. And why isn't there any information about how it was built, why it was built, and why it was dismantled?
We'll make sure we're all up to speed here for everyone watching. So we're talking now about a very specific part of recent history, which I got interested in after a trip to Florence and having started trying to study cathedrals and try to understand the energy structure of cathedrals and what they were built for and how they may have been used. And when I got back, I bumped into a YouTube video by some random thing on the Chicago exposition of 1893. And when I saw the exposition, you're talking, in this case, this was 700 acres. The buildings were massive. Like the manufacturer's building at the Chicago Exposition could house 300,000 people. And when I began looking at it and seeing the scale and the scope and that it looked like ancient Rome, like it was Rome in Chicago. And then I find out, and as soon as these things are over, they're blown up, torn down, set fire to, whatever, and destroyed. It was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard. And I couldn't not continue to research it. And the more I researched these fairs, which kind of started in 1851 worldwide and really stopped with the First World War in 1915, the last one in San Francisco, and then they've continued, but they've changed completely. But this one period of time all over the world, so it's just the United States gives us a really deep examination, because there's not supposed to be a great history like there is in Europe of buildings. So, but they were happening all through Europe. They were happening in Asia. They were happening in Australia, New Zealand. All over the world were these gigantic fairs with these massive buildings, all built in record time. The Chicago Exposition was supposedly 2 years. The St. Louis Exposition was 2 years. Buffalo was done in a year, with no explanation of how that's possible. And then the whole thing is, just destroyed. And they try to put explanations that they were built so quickly. First, they say old world craftsmanship. First of all, that the people of the 1800s knew how to build things. That's the first answer you get. The second is they built with this material. They're supposed to have built with a material called staff, which is like a plaster and wood. And you just supposedly put this up very quickly.
Like lath and plaster, kind of.
Yeah, that's the presentation. But that led into two really big problems. So I'll finish this little intro, and then you guys can ask whatever questions you want to ask on it, and why this is important. I mean, it's also this important for me to eventually tell you why studying this is important. It's not just curiosity or something. This is really important for where we are now. The World Expositions of that time period are the setup point for where we are right now in our experience, and we need to talk about that. But the two issues right away. The first was quite obvious. Like when you look at something like the Buffalo Electric Tower. So this thing that was built was, 400 feet high, like just a massive structure that had 100,000 light bulbs on it. And people could take elevators to the top and sit on the top of it and see all the way to Niagara Falls. And are you going to build that out of wood and plaster and expect that that's going to survive when people are at the top of that and whatever? Like, you're risking lawsuit. That's obviously that you have to build that quite solidly. So right away, the story began to be a problem. But it's when I went to talk to a building contractor, and I showed the building contractor the pictures of the Chicago Fair and the St. Louis Fair. And I asked him, if you were going to build this today, how long would this take you? And he said, well, it's 2 years for the planning, because this is a lot of landscaping work and a lot of work just to plan out where the buildings are going to be and how to get the logistics of the materials and the workforce. Then we're going to do 2 or 3 years to do the landscaping. We'll actually have to, because you've got canals and you've got roadways and you've got train lines, you've got all this stuff. And then he said roughly about 12 years for the buildings. And he's talking with a workforce of like 50 or 100,000 people, unlimited budget, modern machines. So with modern machines, unlimited budget, 15 years. So when I told him, and they did it in 2 years, his only answer was, well, that's not possible. And then he looked at the photographs of the supposed construction. I'll stop after this and let you guys ask. I showed him the photos and particularly of St. Louis. St. Louis has the most supposed construction photos. And he looked at these and he said, well, I don't know what this is, because there's no building materials on site. There's no stacks of wood. There's no stacks of rocks. There's no indication that there's been a guy here. There's no coffee cup on the ground. There's no piece of a sandwich on the ground. Where are these guys going to the bathroom? If you've got 50,000 guys, you need to have bathrooms available. He looked at this, and this guy who sees building sites his whole life, and he was very clear. No one's been on this site for years. And so again, I asked him, well, how did they get this built? And well, obviously they didn't.
So what were at these sites prior to?
That's the question. And that's the question, if we had an answer to, we would know. It came that of my answers of how this could have been done like this, it was either A, They had a technology. They really did build them, and they had the money. That means they had to have a technology that was beyond what they're supposed to have at the time, that they could build these things in the specified 2 years. Or a lot of the buildings were already there from an ancient civilization, and that they just needed to be cleaned up, restored, painted, build a few other things around them in the similar style so that you can't tell the difference with the new paint job. And that's also likely. If you look at St. Louis gives us our best guess, because where the St. Louis Fair turned out, Jackson Park, Forest Park, Jackson Park. I can't remember which park it is, but there was well-known spot of 20 or 30 native Indian medicine pyramid mounds, because Cahokia is on the one side of the river where St. Louis is, and then there was the second city right where the fair was, and they supposedly leveled the fair. They just knocked it all down, these structures, and built the fair on top of it. That's the story. Now, of course, there's no photographs of what these mounds were. There's no drawings of what these mounds were. How do we know they weren't some of the buildings that became the fair, that they just labeled native Indian mounds on the history, but it was the very things that became the fair.
What was the time frame of that 400-foot tower in Buffalo?
That one was built in 1901.
And how long did it take?
So again, I think that this all happened within a year.
With an elevator to the top.
With an elevator to the top, with electricity supposedly being done by Tesla coming from turbines at Niagara Falls. So supposedly they had set up these massive turbines that were bringing all the electricity, because the Buffalo World's Fair had as many electric lights in the fair as New York City. As the whole of New York City in 1901, the Buffalo Fair had the same number of electric lights. If you see photos of the fair, it's like almost like searchlights everywhere. But it's so weird because this is the fair that President McKinley was assassinated, in a very weird story. That's a completely bizarre story.
At the fair?
At the fair. He was killed at the Temple of Music, yeah. And where they took him, there was a hospital on site, but the hospital, because it happened later in the day, didn't have any electric lights. There's more electric lights at the entire exposition than New York City, but they didn't think of putting a couple of lights in the hospital for possible emergencies. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This when I first heard you talking about this on Crow 777, this is like, I'm in the building trades. I'm a union elevator constructor. Yeah. So that's why this 400-foot elevator in 1901 is absolutely preposterous. I worked on a 58-story iron frame building in San Francisco, 181 Fremont Street, and 58 stories, and it had, elevators all the way to the top.
Right.
And it was, a 3 or 4 year job with today's,
right,
technology. So Debra lives in Marin County, California. No traffic from her front door to the west side of the Golden Gate Bridge. The San Francisco side is probably about a 10 to 12 minute drive, right?
Right.
Okay. So I watched some of your stuff on San Francisco. San Francisco's a big spot for all this ancient construction, and can you talk about kind of the inconsistencies between like some of the old photographs? It happens in Chicago as well. I'm reading your book right now. I'm only 50 pages in, so it's fantastic. But just the inconsistencies between the pictures of the cities and the populations of the cities at the time.
Yeah, San Francisco is probably the best smoking gun we have of that. The history, at least of the United States, has to be wrong. Because the story there is you've got supposedly a nothing city until 1847 or 1848, where the one U.S. battleship and a few sailors take over this small little community and start with, a couple hundred people. And bizarrely, a whole bunch of Mormons who just show up at random in the middle of all this. It was
kind of like a mining outpost, right, for the gold rush?
Well, not yet. It had just been taken over as a city.
Okay.
1 year after that, then starts the gold rush, right? All of a sudden, and it's actually the guy who led the Mormon group that had had come over there was the one who initiated the gold rush, and it was his store that sold all the mining supplies.
Was that Brannon?
Interesting. Yeah, Brannon. So
He was a pretty rotten
so you
guy.
so you have this very strange. So you have this very small supposed city, and we have pictures supposedly of the city of 1851, photographs, actual photographs of just what you would expect a town like this to be, kind of shack-like, simple shanty town. It's a mining town. It's, but we also have some paintings from that period that have Greco-Roman buildings already in the paintings. Okay, that's strange. When you get to my book on the chapter on San Francisco, one of them's in there, and you can see it yourself. You flash forward to 1878. So now we're flash forwarding 28 years only. And we have the most dangerous piece of historical evidence in the world. And that is the Edward Muybridge panorama of San Francisco. He took a complete 360-degree circle photograph of the city. And there are massive buildings. It's a city that's got to have, like, you would think 300,000 or 400,000 people, and you've got I counted at least 10 or 12 cathedrals, and you've got domes and towers and structures. It's not like you just fired this stuff in a hurry. This is like high duty, extremely high quality construction. And where do you get the people that learn how to build like this? This is supposed to be cowboys and miners. Where have they got the time to build cathedrals that look like, there's one that looks like it's from downtown Moscow? Where is this? So that's one part of it, that you've got this all of a sudden in 28 years, an unbelievably massive city of fantastic buildings. In the photographs, there's no people, like zero, nobody. And what makes it worse, there's no horses, there's no carts. And what's even really strange, because someone can say, well, don't you understand, the cameras at that time had these special exposure times, and to take a proper photo, everybody had to be off the street, or you'll get a little bit of blurring. But here's the weird part. Everything at that time should be run on horseback, right? Horses should be the main thing of your city. So not only should we see lots of horses, there should be, what do you call the thing you tie your horse to? A horse, there's a name for it.
Like a tether.
Yeah.
You tether the horse.
Yeah, like the wood thing that you tie the horse to. There's none of them anywhere in San Francisco. Like you can see all the street. There's none of these horse things. So what the hell are you looking at? Where are all the people? And it looks like an absolutely deserted city. To me, it looks like a city that's been literally found. Like, this is like the first day some people have showed up, or day 2, and somebody's taking a photo of, like, look what we found. Kind of that's the feeling I get when I look at this panorama. And again, if I ask the building contractor, can this be done in 28 years? His answer is no, not possible. But then again, San Francisco is so bizarre, because then you look at the earthquake of 1906. Before I get to the earthquake, let me just be sure that people understand why this is important. So this period of time, this 1850 to 1900 period of time, to me is the start of what we call our life existence that we know of now. These things that are being called a reset, I don't think it's a brand new word. This thing has happened many times in this reality. Many times in this realm have, you might say, a button been pushed and the whole thing started again. And to me, this period of time after 1850 is the starting point of whatever this last reset event was. And to me, these world fairs were the indoctrination points. Because a big part of the fairs was not just, they showcased technology, one, but they also showcased big historical exhibits, scientific exhibits. They were very important to have what you could call cultural zoos, where primitive peoples from all over the world were brought in to show the savage that has been evolved from, so that everybody knows that if you are living in a Victorian style with your nice jacket and your top hat, you are not one of these savages. So they had these, what you can basically call them, zoos. And to me, what the fairs were in the entire time period is the foundation indoctrination of what we became to know as our current experience. If you want to look to the way government is now, the way education is now, the way science is now, the way almost everything, when you track it back, some of those origins are dug right into this period, 1850 to 1900, when these bizarre fairs are happening all over the world, that I think are the best propaganda you can have when you don't have television and movies and the internet. You do it through the fairs. So that's why this period is important, I think, and that's why it needs to be really examined, because it's not just something in the past. It's I think the marker point to where we are now and potentially where we're going, where we're headed. Because this time is also the time of these orphan trains, when these all of a sudden you'd have 50,000 orphans in a city, and like they just ship them on trains into the West. Well, what orphans? Where are these orphans come from? Where are their parents? Why are they shipping them? Whatever. It's also the time of these building these massive insane asylums. I mean, insane asylums that they're bigger than Medici palaces in Florence and more beautifully built. And you need an insane asylum like this in every single city in the world. Like, who are they putting in these insane asylums? And all of this is happening at the exact same time all over the world. Not a coincidence.
Yeah, my friend Casey, he's going real deep in this. He lives in Oakland, California, and whenever he gets a chance, he gets out over to San Francisco and even finds stuff on the east side of the bay too. And he's taking pictures. He just sent me right before we started about 10 pictures of the human zoo from Golden Gate Park at the original expo. And yeah, it's got like Eskimos, it's got people that look like they're Pacific Islanders, it's got all sorts of different African tribes. And so your contention there is that it's just was used as a promotion for like American Anglo supremacy. And it's
slightly, it's also a creation of the historical narrative in people's minds, that when we write a book and tell you this is how primitive people, the people who are supposed to be living before now lived, we are giving you the example for your mind. So that the same thing, just like a movie, you're putting the image to the information. Without the information, it doesn't hold the same. So it's almost like they're creating the history. And again, is it true? Is it not true? I don't know. But we know this is what they wanted to present. And that's what makes it so unique to study these things in such detail.
So it might not have just been African people living in a tribal setting. That might have been a construct as well.
Exactly. We have no idea. I thought I knew. I'm a historian like you, right? Went to history, got a degree, thought I knew something about history. After the last 2 years of my study, I've had to step back and say, I'm not sure about anything. Actually, okay. I'm not sure of nothing. We got photos of we got film of the Kennedy assassination, and we still really don't know what the hell happened there. We're supposed to know what happened 300, 400, 500, 6,000 years ago. Yeah. And it might all be made up. Simon, you got a question on while we're going through?
Well, one comment and a question about the expo. The comment of San Francisco with the panoramic view and everything really does remind me of a story. I think it was from H.P. Lovecraft about a city which was blown into the future, and all its inhabitants. It was through some experiment. It just kind of rings like that. You know, there's something. The city suddenly appears there. Nobody there, just the city. The question though is to do with the expo, and I'm sure I heard you talk once that the entrance, the people that got to go to the expo, some of them had a badge with their photograph on it. How? Either I'm remembering it wrong. If I'm not, how is that possible back in the 1800s?
The more I looked into the fairs, I thought this was going to be a 2-month fun little thing, right? Something odd about the Chicago Exposition, and off I go. But every time I got to a new piece of research, read it, because every one of these fairs, what people may not realize, there were like 10 or 15 books written about them at the time, like not now. I mean, like the Chicago Exposition had like 10 or 15 books written by historians at the time about the fair while it was going on, and everyone had travel guides. So like Rand McNally, the famous You could get the Rand McNally travel guide for the St. Louis World's Fair, for example. So you have all this potential information to dig into, and the more I dug into it, the stranger it got. Like, photographs. You would get a badge with your picture on it as like identification to enter the fair. A lot of the fairs, you would get a diploma on leaving, an actual diploma. And of course, it's got the Greek or Roman statues in the background and the Greek or Roman goddesses on the front. And it literally has the word, like Panama Pacific Exposition diploma 1915. Well, you get a diploma for finishing some sort of schooling course. What sort of schooling course are you being granted a diploma for going to see an exposition? So there's, the more you look into them, the stranger they become, because there's so much of them, they don't make any sense at all. At Chicago, they actually didn't allow photographs to be taken. You had to pay, I think it was a $2 fee if you were going to take a photograph, which was a massive fee at the time. And there were special police that their only job was to walk around the fair and arrest people who were taking photographs. So why are they so worried about people taking photographs at the Chicago Exposition?
So back then, sorry to interject, Howdie, but back then, taking a photograph would have been a big deal. It would be like stand still, and then like one of those box brownie things would have almost like the concertina leather case to take the photograph. Am I right? Yeah?
I would think so.
Right. Okay. So if there's, let's say, 5,000 to 10,000 people at these fairs, and each one of those person gets an ID badge, I still can't get my head around this, because you can't have 5,000 to 10,000 people waiting outside to have each individual photograph from a darkroom come out, and a guy putting Pritt stick on the back of it and sticking it to a piece of card. To me, it sounds like digital technology. I know you don't have all the answers, but again, how? It doesn't make any sense.
No, it's once you start looking into the fairs, and like once you start realizing how much power these fairs were using, how much energy they were being using, where's the energy coming from? And I'm pretty sure that the electricity, what's called the electricity building at all these fairs, were actually generating it the ancient way, the way that the buildings create, like the way I'd found the cathedrals create, magnify and project energy, that I think the sites themselves are projecting energy, because Chicago had an above ground train, an electric train, 1893. They had a moving electric walkway around the pier, 1893. And again, all of these things, as you begin to actually honestly start asking questions, makes no sense. Or you take a look at the Omaha Fair of 1898, I think that one was. So Omaha is a city of what at the time, 60,000 people, 70,000 people. They're supposed to have 2 million people come to the exposition in Omaha. Well, one, how are they all getting there? Two,
what was the
where are they going to
population
stay?
of Omaha?
I don't know. I'm guessing like what, 70,000, 80,000 at that time, maximum. So where are they all going to stay? They're not just coming in for the day and leaving. They got to stay overnight. So where do you house them? Where do you look after them? So there's also these stories of like, 2 million people visited the fair. Well, did they? How do we know how many people visited the fair? All the photos I see, there's some people there, but not massive amounts of people. So we don't know how many people were there, weren't there? And the people, I don't know if you guys, Adam, Debra, Simon, if you've looked at some of the fair photos and looked at the people that are in them, so often the people look completely out of place, or they look almost lost. Like they look like the thing you just said about going into the future or something. Like literally these people have just like been dropped like from the sky, and there they are now all of a sudden, first day in this place, and they're like, they don't know where the hell they are. Every single thing I look into these structures is so weird. And now a woman, Camelia Crone, I think is her name. She started looking at what's at the fair sites now, which I never really took the time to think about. But she's finding a lot of fertility symbols and a lot of like fertility things built into the landscape. And she's been tracking lines between St. Louis and San Francisco and Vancouver, which has things like, so you have a Golden Gate, a Lion's Gate, and I think there was a Silver Gate or something she called it in St. Louis. And so it's like whatever happened at these fairs didn't end. It's just because the fair ended and the buildings were torn down, it's like the site is still active. Whatever the site was being used for is continually being used for something today. And it's, I think that's one of the next parts of my research is to really look at every single site where the expos have been to really get a sense of what's there now, because it's not just going to be built accidentally or randomly. She's shown me that whatever was going on at these fairs has continued right till today. Yeah.
So I haven't got to the part in your book where you address your opinions on a catastrophic event like the mud flood or something like that. What's your opinion? And I kind of wanted to relate it to the story of how they jacked up Chicago like 6 feet with bottle jacks. Can you get into that at all?
Well, you're a builder. You should go talk to your building people and ask them how you could lift Chicago today by 6 feet.
Well, let me tell you something before you get into it.
Yeah.
I saw some sort of like History Channel show about how they did it probably 3 or 4 years ago, and I watched it and I took it for face value. I was just like, oh wow, that's wild. They've used some screw jacks and jacked up a gigantic city because it was a little bit muddy on the ground, and then they don't explain what they put underneath it to shore up the buildings, and now right. Everything's just taller.
Yeah.
And I believed it. And you know.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing that we just would believe that because it's on TV?
Yep.
You know, but
I would say I would put that into the same not trying to insult anybody, I would put that into the same belief category of putting 2 of everything in the whole world onto a wooden ship to preserve them in the event of a flood.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of the craziest stories I ever came across because, once I started looking into the fairs, you had to look into the cities, and you found all the cities of North America have strange stories too. That's how I got into some of this stuff. And the fact that people could believe that you actually took jacks, and what was so amazing is they claim that, and they didn't have to shut the city down. All the businesses continued operating. You just kept living in your building, even while they jacked it all up on you and all this going on. No problem. You just, not even like you have to take the day off and go somewhere else while they finish the job. It all just continues on its own. And what's great is when you look at photographs, there's only like 2 or 3 existing photographs of this supposed thing, but there's lots of drawings. And many of the drawings are exactly the same as the photograph. But the drawing has these guys with jacks and the things being lifted up. When I see the exact same photograph that it was taken from, there's no jacks, there's no one doing anything. It's some guys digging out some holes, actually. It almost looks like they're either filling a hole under there, or they're trying to fill a hole on the other side of the street, or, something is going on, but they're not lifting anything. And again, it's just, why would you tell this story? Why would you make this up? But you've got the whole, like you say, these potential destruction. The other thing of the 1800s that's bizarre is every single city in North America goes through some massive fire that seems to burn down the entire city and then magically reappears a year or 2 later. And when you look at the photographs, though, when you look at, and there's thousands of these photographs on the internet, just pick your city: Boston, New York, Charleston, Vancouver, Seattle, Portland. It doesn't matter.
Portland had one,
yeah, Chicago. It doesn't matter. You pick whatever. These cities look like Dresden in 1944. And it doesn't take long when looking at these photographs. It's like, well, who bombed this city? Because a fire does not do. It doesn't melt stone like this. It doesn't shear granite stone buildings in half. It doesn't. And even even when you look at pictures from supposedly from the Civil War, which is this time frame of like destroyed places like Charleston and Richmond, Virginia, and whatever, you have to really think, how many times would the cannons of the day have to literally be fired over and over and over again to make the kind of destruction you would see with the supposed equipment on hand of the day? Something happened, I think, that's nationwide or maybe worldwide at that time. I would have to say it's either on this side, it's some kind of warfare, or on the other side, it's some sort of, sun plasmic electromagnetic charge or something that hit the earth or whatever. And my guess is these cities were all destroyed in a very short period of time, not over the 100 years that it's claimed to have taken, that this was a very short period of destruction. And if they gave the real dates of this, too many people would ask questions, because these are like complete destruction. And I don't want to say this is the answer also, but another thing to remember is H.G. Wells wrote War of the Worlds in 1894. So right at the end of this entire period comes one of the key moments of this first extraterrestrial attack kind of literature in our work. And I know a few people are wondering, is he writing a novel or is he writing a documentary?
Do you think that both scenarios that you just played out, either the war or either the sun rays coming down and blowing everything up, one's controlled and one's not, or they're both controlled, or?
And I have no idea, but I do know that the more I did a talk with Jay Wiedner, I guess it was a couple of weeks ago. We did a talk about, is this a simulation?
Yep.
Is our reality, how real, not just how real is it? Because if it's a simulation, then that means it's like a video game, right? It's been constructed in very specific ways, and it runs by very specific programmed things, which would include one of the two key ways that you would know if you're in a simulation. One is the cyclic nature of things. The cycles would be absolutely perfect, because in the video game, every time you open the door, the same thing will always be behind that door, right? Things don't necessarily change unless in the program. So the cycle is continuous. The other thing would be, which is very interesting that they read somewhere, was that if you were programming a reality, you would spend more time programming the present and the future. You would spend way less time putting together the past. You would leave that vague. So if you're studying the past and you can't get really clear, detailed information and understanding of what's back there, that's a high likelihood that you're dealing with a simulation then, because it's been left vague because the programmer was focusing on the future of how the simulation was going to go, not the time before the day one of the simulation starting. So all of these things link into this bizarre possibility of it's all part of some sort of odd cyclic nature of a very strange reality that we are continuously presented not to examine. Simon?
Yeah, I've got I was just pondering all that. One of the things,
it's like, even though I can't see you, even like, because I can't see Simon on the screen, but I sort of get a sense of him sometimes. It's like his mind is active right now, so I should see where he's at.
Hugely. I'm actually there. I'm picturing myself there, and I think we're all three of us, myself, Deborah, and Adam, are all wondering about the timeline here. So personally, all of these expositions happening and jacking up buildings, which I completely don't think is possible. I'm not, unlike Adam, I'm not from a construction background, but I don't buy that at all, period. Even in this day and age, I don't buy it. So first of all, I'd like to talk about the mysterious fleet of ships that were going around at the time, and also picking up on maybe the last point you were talking about. Was there a forced either lesson or education for humanity? So first of all, about the fleet of ships, I think you've talked about before that really nobody knew what they were or where they were from, as in, so carry on. Sorry, I'm just babbling. Carry on.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so he's talking about what's known as the Great White Fleet. And that actually left the Jamestown Exposition of 1907. So it started at a World's Fair, a giant fleet of U.S. battleships that were going around the world in a wonderful peace mission, traveling the world. Okay, so first of all, that's one of the weirdest things you would think of, is sending a bunch of the new naval power battleships all around the world, stopping everywhere. It's either a sign of, we're the United States, don't screw with us, or it's some have called it like a trophy run. It's kind of like in hockey, when you win the Stanley Cup, you skate around the rink with it a couple times to kind of show off we're the winners. And so this trip that they made has some really weird things, because it's often just places they stop or stop afterwards have earthquakes, have volcanoes happen to them. They stop in San Francisco, of course, in 1908. It's one of their stops right after the earthquake. And of course, there's a wonderful photo opportunity of the fleet there and the rebuilding of San Francisco. But it's one of the strangest stories, again, of trying to figure out, why would a country want to send a bunch of battleships around the world on a peace mission?
On a peace mission.
So right there, no one has been able to come up with a really good answer for what that is. But the fact that it started at the Jamestown Exposition, and Michael over at Susquehanna Alchemy, he does a lot of work on trying to look at that part of the world, and particularly Jamestown and the importance of Jamestown, because it was like the first colony of the United States, and has the story of Jamestown is like mythology, really. It's not history, it's mythology. And so this Great White Fleet is somehow linked to the mythology. It's linked to the starting of the United States. It's linked to all this bizarre stuff. And then when you're asking about like a lesson, do you mean like a lesson that was at the fairs, or a lesson or education from the period in general, Simon? I'm not sure.
I would say like a lesson. As far as the battleships are concerned, and you're talking about holograms, I'm just going to throw this one at the pot and I'll move on.
Okay.
They appeared to look like battleships. Take that as you want. Whether they were or not, I don't know. But no, a lesson because all of this, the expositions, all of the earthquakes, all of the fires, it sounds like almost humanity at the time were going through either a scolding or, no, this is the way it is. We're going to tell you how it is. And if this fleet that appeared to look like battleships were going around, that's where I'm coming from. Were humanity, the Great Reset, were they being taught a lesson in the very worst terms of what I said there?
Yeah, or again, it maybe doesn't even have to be like you're saying, being taught a lesson, or somebody has the Old Testament story of God's going to kill everybody off, and like you say, save Noah with his ship. It could also just be that there are these cycles of destruction that are built right into this entire thing. The thing is, if you know the cycles of destruction, then you can know how to handle them and be prepared. And if you want to reset the world, you just don't let the population, the rest of the humans, know that it's happening. You keep them, all you have to do is keep them in the dark, keep them stupid, and you don't have to do anything at all, because the way the game that you might say that we're in is structured, it'll do it on its own. So you have to start wondering again, if we extrapolate this to where we are right now, because we are moving into a grand solar minimum, we are having these great fluctuations in the sun, in the magnetic fields of the Earth. So are we in the point of another cyclic, really big shift? And really, all that the group that's been in power to this point had to do is make sure humans didn't get the information to let them know that was going on. Because if you know what's going on, you can prepare. I think of a place like Cappadocia in Turkey, these giant underground, almost like cities that have been built in the past. And no one can really explain why you would need to build something so extensive and so clear just to, save yourself from some barbarians and some raiders and it would make more sense if you're saving yourself and your whole city, whatever, from a quite major destruction that in advance is coming. Like if you knew 50 years in the future, something is going to happen. You've got 50 years as an entire civilization to prepare for it and get through it fine. But if you don't know what's coming, then you get what Simon says. It's easy then on the backside of it when it's over for whoever, you might say, comes out of their safe bunkers and says, we're in charge now. And you'd say, when we did that because you wouldn't listen to us, right? And this could be the reason for all the orphans, all the whatever, that if you start with just a reset with a group of children, mostly, the children have no frame of reference. They have no background. They don't really know what's going on. Certainly if it's coming after a time of destruction and difficulty, then it's very, very, their minds are very susceptible to just doing whatever the person in charge makes them safe, feel safe, tell them. So you're very easy to then just pump in whatever you want to tell them as a story. And again, this idea that we did this, so if you don't listen to us, we'll do it again. And anybody who wants to fight you or anybody who wants to try to remember the old world, well, we just put them in these new insane asylums and we get rid of them. And either they get re-educated and can come back out and join the group, or they just stay in there forever until they die. And I'm wondering if we're going to, unfortunately, potentially see something similar starting to happen in the next few years, that this is just the warm-up for what Simon might be calling the new re-education of humans to believe a completely new story. And either you're going to be like the orphans and believe it, or you're going to be the ones on the fringe meeting the insane asylum. We may be seeing this cyclic thing happening right now, and I think that's why talking about this, even though there's lots of things to talk about in my world, from shamanism and Zen, and dealing with reality, but this is an important topic too, because I think it relates to where we are. It's not just in the past.
Didn't you say, I think I saw this in one of your videos, that the cycle is approximately 400 years?
That's what some people have said. I don't know for sure. That's what other researchers are claiming is sort of a number. And that's interesting, because that runs into roughly about the 1600s. And the 1600s, that really ties into a lot of the work I've been doing on Rennes-le-Château and southern France, and that very strange mystery, because that's the exact time of the Poussin paintings that are key to the story of the founding of Montreal and Quebec City from the group that was involved at St. Sulpice. So it is possible that this 400 years might be a number, but I have no idea what the cycles might be. So
Yeah, I'd like to tie that back into like what I do for a job and ask you your opinion on it. Like, I live in Portland, Oregon now, and you know what's going on here probably. I mean, like statues are being torn down. And then all these just beautiful old, like early 1900s neighborhoods, everything's just being demolished. And all I do for a living is I go around Portland and put in 3-stop elevators at brand new concrete condominiums, 2 stories of condos in the upstairs, and then a floor of retail stores at the bottom. That's all there is now.
Okay. What's the question?
The question is that, you know, kind of what we're seeing, the same thing of getting rid of history and implementing something new.
Of course. You know, if you really had a problem with a statue, like let's say I've got a problem with what the statue represents. Okay, well, don't tear it down and get rid of it. What you'd want to do then is keep it, and you keep the original presentation of what was made, and you put up a second plaque, a second piece of information that says, the plaque to your left says this, but we have now come to understand and see history differently, and we're presenting our view of history here so that everybody can then come and see the various views of history, the various possibilities of it, and can start making decisions for themselves on where the past was. To just eliminate something means there is no discussion, it's over. And that's what's going on. That's really what's happening. So
yeah, because I'm 41 years old, and what I've, you know, just the basic, probably wrong history that I learned all growing up in school about presidents and what they represented is completely opposite of what a 20-year-old has been taught about it.
And it's that very old saying: if you don't know history, history is just a myth that's there to explain why things are the way they are right now. It's supposed to be to explain where we came from. So if you control the myth, it's just a myth. If you control the myth, you can then control what's happening now, because anybody who questions, well, why is this like this? Why is education like this? Why is our financial system like this? Well, here's the history. This explains it to you. Oh, okay. But so if you control the history, you're the one in control of how things are. So, and if you eliminate history completely, then you can do whatever you want, because there's no frame of reference. You know, where's some of the biggest protests that are going on against what's happening right now? Well, that's in European cities like Germany and Austria. They've got a pretty good, they still have history that teaches them their totalitarian regimes and what that looks like. So they are still able, because it's still in their schooling, they're still able to turn on the TV and look out the window and say, wow, this is my grade 8 history class. I better do something about that. But in the rest of the world, where you suck history out of students, if you've got no point of reference from the past to be able to examine where you are now, easy to go anywhere.
Yeah, there's a.
Speaking of going anywhere, should we move to some other topic? Should we try a different? Because I guess we got about half an hour or something left. Or
yeah, let's go as long as we can.
Let's try a different. Just so we try to fill in a few different topics for the people listening. So let's try something else.
Simon, I know you had some other questions.
If you don't mind me coming to this. The Knights Templar were more than just warrior monks protecting the pilgrims upon the arduous trek to the Holy Lands. There are so many accounts or conjectures associated with the mythology, it's hard to ask one question. But I suppose if there was one that I would really like to have answered, it would be, in your opinion, what did the Knights of the Holy Order find below the Temple Mount? And do you think that hold that they did have over the church still works for them today?
One thing I really like about, actually, all of you are asking questions, you're kind of saying it in a sense of like, I'd like to know your opinion, which is very important, because some people come to my channel and they're like, or read a book, why aren't you just telling me the answer? Why don't you just have, you're saying this is because I don't know what the answer is. It's research and it's opinion. We don't have a time machine, and we have to do our best to formulate a clear opinion. But I know whatever I say today, I could say something different tomorrow with more information. So that's a reminder for everyone watching to this information is always just any history or any knowledge like this. It's an opinion based on research that hopefully can change tomorrow if needed. So the Knights Templar, they are one of the most misunderstood groups, I think, in history. I don't think there's any difference between them and the Cathars at all. I'm not sure that they were actually two separate groups. I think they may have been one group, one more of a, who had different functions or different factions together. I don't think there was a Cathar destruction in the 1200s and a Knights Templar destruction in the 1300s. I think it all happened at one time. And Simon's main question is, what did they find? Because so the story goes, in that during the midst of the First Crusade, 7, and we can't call them knights because they weren't knights. They were actually, in some cases, people that were related to Bernard of Clairvaux, the famed monk, who got some out of jail, got some from wherever, but they were all family interlinked, interconnected in some very odd, long, deep bloodlines that went to the Holy Land, were given by King Baldwin access to the Temple Mount for years, where they supposedly dug. Now, supposedly the Knights of Malta, St. John's Hospitaliers, had a crack at this before this time, and I guess didn't find anything, or there was more to find, or who knows what that story is. But the Knights Templar, so the story goes, stayed there for whatever it was, 5, 6, 7 years, found something, immediately left, and then within a few years were given papal bull by the Vatican and were made a special religious organization and gained a power which was supposed to be protecting pilgrims to the Holy Land, How 7 or 10 guys will protect thousands of pilgrims to the Holy Land is, of course, impossible. What do I think they found? Because some like to speculate it's an object, right? The Ark of the Covenant or the Holy Grail or some sort of, object. Some, of course, try to go with it. They found documents and information of Jesus and this bloodline and etc. If you want my opinion, I think they, should I say this openly and get myself into trouble? I've come to believe that the story that is within the New Testament does have some basis in truth, but is in the wrong time period and in the wrong place on earth. That the story takes place much earlier and the story takes place in a different part of the world. And that the people known as the Knights Templar were going there not to bring something from the Middle East to France. They were going to get something that had been in France, had been taken to the Middle East, and were bringing it back. And my feeling is what they brought back might have been very similar to when we go back to the early part of this conversation, talking about the stone circles and that kind of stuff, that it's, to me, whatever they found is something that generates power at a particular location, and that somehow connecting whatever it was they brought with the exact place that it's supposed to be generated some sort of knowledge or power or something, and that was the underlying source of what became the Knights Templar. And do I think there is still a group of Knights Templar hidden somewhere that is nothing? Because anybody who tries to say we are descendants of the Knights Templar or the Knights Templar is part of our organization, wrong. They are not. The whatever the original Knights Templar are, if they're still here, they are still so hidden, you would have no idea about them if they didn't open the door, so to speak, and let you in. So I still think there's a group of these people, men and women, because there was women involved in the Knights Templar as much as there were men. It was very important to the Knights Templar. It's interesting how one question leads you into so many topics, but this idea of the masculine and the feminine, and how masculine and feminine properly interact and cooperate with each other on the earth, and how that works not only in nature, but within humans, within this reality, and the proper use of sexuality and sexual energy, and all of these things, these were all a key part of the Knights Templar understanding. And I still think this group exists in a very fundamental and hidden way, and they may still be active in certain ways, and let's just say we may not be done with their story yet. We may see them emerge again in our lifetime. How was that, Simon?
That was perfect. I'd like to say to my all listeners, Howdie's book on the Grail and the Templars, this particular subject, it's a huge subject, and even if we spent the rest of the night talking about it, we can't possibly cover everything at all. If Adam and Debra won't mind, could I just ask one maybe last question, if that's okay with you guys?
Yeah, this is out of my realm, so go for it, man. I'm really enjoying listening to it.
We've still got some time, so you go ahead.
It's not about the Templars per se. Well, I don't know. It might be. So ancient Egypt, as we all know, has some of the world's best known, unexplained, forgive that oxymoron, architectural anomalies. I personally don't think thousands of slaves built the pyramids or would have had the wherewithal to have achieved such perfection. Now, it might lead us back to the world fairs, as in things being that they shouldn't. Again, in your opinion, with the pyramids, what's the answer here? In your opinion, what's the answer?
You mean for how or why?
Well, yeah, that very thing, how and why. So you have these. Which
one interests you more?
How? Well, I think how. If I have to pick one, I'll say how. In that time frame where we were supposed to be, or they were supposed to be. And I'm not talking pre-dynastic Egyptians here, because that's a whole different story. But with the narrative them being 5,000 years old, only having copper chisels and not even having the wheel, how could that possibly be a thing? The Valley of the Kings, where into rock, they're just so geometrically perfect. How was that achieved, would you think?
Well, yeah, the great thing is there's only so much study of the ancient world you can do over the internet or in a book. You have to go there and you have to see the site and you have to see what's existing, because when you go to places like Abu Sir and Saqqara and Dashur and whatnot, and you see the perfectly polished granite, the stones are like they're so smooth it's like glass. Like there isn't an imperfection anywhere in the granite or basalt stones. You see the drill holes that are in the basalt granite, or you'll see things that can pretty much only be cut. They're so fine with laser tools, and yet the archaeologist will still hold on to it's a guy with a copper tool banging it with a chisel. It's so mind-bending, because anyone with any sort of awareness, when they look at this, knows that's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. And so for me, my first answer to all of this is the ancient Egyptians didn't build it. Now, the Old Kingdom Egyptians still had a great knowledge and a great wisdom and great construction abilities. And you can see some of those construction abilities on the site, but I can now instantly tell the difference between the things on, say, at a place like Giza or Saqqara that were built by the Old Kingdom Egyptians, and the stuff that had been there long before, that when the Egyptians showed up, were doing the repairs and the reconstruction to. So yeah, there is a similarity, I think, to the fair, that the ancient Egyptians are getting credited for building these sites, when in many cases they were just the ones restoring the sites. And so the builders of the real builders with the megalithic blocks that are, yeah, they're 200 tons and they're placed like Lego, and they're perfectly aligned. And more so is the energy that is involved at these sites. There's nowhere else in the world that I've ever felt I've had the same kind of experiences as in Old Kingdom Egyptian sites. The most bizarre, positively, experiences. The energy and the it's like a couple of them. After I'd had a couple of them, I realized whatever I thought I knew about how smart these builders were, I know jack shit compared to what they know. These people, I'm calling them people because I think that's one of the real disservices that the current archaeology does. It tries to find, either downplay what's there, make it seem simple, make it seem easy, make it seem anybody could do it, it's not that big a deal, or the other side tries to make it fanciful. It was aliens that came down in their spaceships, it was magicians with their magic wands. It couldn't just be humans like you and me. It couldn't be us finding a deeper power, a deeper wisdom, a deeper ability to use our mind and our energy and our resources. It couldn't be that, because then we might start asking, well, why am I living in this shitty world when I could be part of creating the world that I used to see in ancient Egypt? Why don't we make that again? And I get the sense that these things were built with I mean, there's so many simplistic answers to try to get thrown out there, and like I just did a video on Abu Sir on my YouTube channel, and I got, of course, the standard 20 or 30 comments that are all telling me how easy this is explained, and that might be true, or a lot of this might be just showing what happens when you tap into a deeper power of the mind. Not this mind, but that mind further back that was accessed in my death experience in the canyon. This sort of all-encompassing absolute totality of mind. When you reach this place of everything, because it's not just a nothing that you reach, it's nothingness and everythingness. So when you've also got everythingness, that means you've got total potential, total possibility, complete everything. And something tells me that when we see sites like Giza, or we see sites like Pumapunku and Tiwanaku in Peru, or we see the Easter Island statues, or we see, these kind of things, what we're actually getting a gift or a glimpse of is what's possible. What humans in their totality might be able to create, not just architecturally, but energetically. And that's something that still excites me every time I see one of these places.
Or do you think that could be the remnants, things like Pumapunku and Egypt and maybe the Göbekli Tepe are just the remnants of a past reset, aka empty Chicago and places like that?
I don't doubt that. I would say for sure you have these. I would put that cycle a long time back, like 10, 20,000, but that's one cycle. Then you've got for sure you have what you would almost call like a temple building cycle, when you see things like Luxor and the Parthenon and sort of that era. And then again, when you look go to Rome and just see the sites of ancient Rome. I mean, the destruction is more than just a bunch of people are upset with some hammers and chisels and they wanted to take down the old place. I mean, it's been really, really destroyed by some sort of severe damage. So you're talking about a second set of grouping. Then maybe we had a third one, and then we had to sort of the end of what you might call the cathedral building period of domes and towers and star forts and what might be called these World Fair buildings, and that's the next round. However, the realm we've lived in our whole life architecturally is without doubt the most draining, the most unaesthetically looking civilization that certainly we've ever had a chance to examine on this planet. We've lived in a very ugly looking world, in a world where the very structures we live in make us sick, because they're not built to any sort of geometric proportions, to any sort of harmonies, to any sort of natural order, to no use of sacred geometry in them. And I wonder, I would love to do an experiment where you take 10 people who are rather ill, not ill enough that they need to be in a hospital, but they're certainly not well enough that they're living a good life, and just take them out somewhere in a natural setting, but build them structures that are that are correct from the standpoint of geometry, of mathematics, of materials used. Just let them live in a natural way, in a natural environment, in a natural mathematical space. And I'm wondering to see, without doing much of anything else, how fast they might all heal. I wouldn't be surprised if the healing process was quicker than anyone might think.
Yeah, Deborah and I learned on a past episode that the building style of today is referred to as brutality.
Yeah.
So that
and
should
it's
tell
also
you.
And it's a world of noise. That's the other thing. There's always noise in our world, from jackhammers to radios on to trains moving to cars moving to it's almost impossible, even living in a small town, to have just stillness, just quiet, except for late at night. And even then you don't really get full stillness, because you're still getting the sound of the electric lights and whatever. And John Anthony West is one of the first ones who put that in to show the difference between the ancient world, which is a world of creating a natural harmonic balance in your day-to-day existence, and the modern world, which is just like you say, it's brutality, it's noise, it's discord. It's like the human body is at war 24 hours a day with the environment that's been created, and I don't think that's by accident. And I think you leave that environment for enough time, it'd be really interesting to see what the body and mind responds to.
Do you think that all of these resets, all of the electromagnetism, all of the building sickness that is around now has been since the start of our story, as in humanity, has been all about steering, retarding, and encouraging humanity's consciousness when, in inverted air quotes, those in charge see fit? Do you think this is about steering our consciousness as, what's allowed? Do
you get where I'm coming from?
Yeah,
on that?
yeah. Certainly now I would say that's the case, but my feeling is that hasn't always been the case. And I think because
But then
I
they
refer,
destroy everything and start again.
yeah, but
What?
I refer to the human mind as a parasite. Now we're not supposed to have it. That it's the thing that has sort of taken over. Because in the canyon, when I most needed my mind, it wasn't there. It was of no value to me when I really needed it, and that showed me, oh yeah, the Gnostics and Castaneda and whoever, they're probably right. It's a virus. It's a parasite. And I think there was a time in this reality where you might say, which we'll call them controllers for a simpler word. They weren't here. That this reality was something completely different. And there's literally a dividing line between the world the way it used to be and the world with this, we'll call it force or this element. And I think a lot of the building construction and a lot of what you might call the architecture and energy work was done by civilizations to keep this force away from them. And that's when you read the mythology and you read the fairy tales and whatever, there's so much of that comes through. But it somehow seems that it isn't held off, can't hold it off forever. Eventually, like you say, there comes a destruction point, and no matter how well you've held it off, it breaks through. But then it seems like it starts again, and a new way. Well, somehow we figured out the old way. It worked for a certain amount of time, and then it stopped. And now we have a different method, and that method holds them for a while, and then so it's hard to know, because it's hard to know exactly who this force that the Gnostics call archons, right? What these archons really are, how they operate, how our world interacts with them, and again, how I've talked about this many times, how I've had the experiences of myself in parallel realities, how I've seen myself die in another reality. I've seen me dead. And so I know there are millions of me's, which makes sense. Why would, if somebody wants to say, oh, this was set up so God can have experiences. Well, why would God only want one experience of me in one body, one life? He would want a million lives so I could experience every possible experience that's literally possible. And again, now you're throwing that into some sort of, like, again, simulation argument, some sort of experimental thing. So who's running the experiment? If it is, why is the experiment being run? And most importantly, at least individually, can you stop the experiment, at least on yourself, and exit? Like can the mouse stop running the maze and just say, I'm forgetting about the maze and the cheese, and I'm just climbing over the wall and heading to the hole in the wall, and I'm gone? And I think that's a really important question to really dig into, is why do we have to stick around here? And so much of spirituality or religion or whatever is all designed to try to explain our experience, you might say, or provide meaning for the experience, or present reasons for living in particular ways. No one is saying, forget about all that first. You need to figure out who and what you are, what this place is, what death is, and see if any of it makes any meaning whatsoever before you can really determine what you should do or shouldn't do. Because maybe the truly best thing for the deepest part of us is exiting, is actually just leaving the whole thing completely. But what do you leave to? What do you enter next? And I really think, again, I feel a lot of what we call the ancient Egyptian funerary texts, a lot of these texts are describing not so much just necessarily the transition state of dying and what happens, but literally if in an awake state, you can cross over from, let's say, in the simulation to outside the simulation. Or if we put it in movie terms, I like to use movies like Pleasantville and The Truman Show and some of these other things where you've got this locked in sort of controlled environment, and then an outside force is there bursting through. It's David and Jennifer in Pleasantville. They just show up and start throwing the town into chaos. Sylvia in The Truman Show sneaks in and tells Truman that his world is not real, or in Donnie Darko, Frank just shows up and starts giving Donnie information that he would have no other way of getting. And I think something very similar. We have that hole in the wall here. There's openings, and this outside force is there for us to tap into if we want to tap into it and get information about our reality and get information about what might be on, might say, the other side of the wall, what's outside of Plato's cave. So
yeah. How does one tap into it?
Yeah. How does one tap into? I think you have to have, first of all, intent that you want it. You're asking for this help. It's one thing I've certainly seen for sure, that there's a lot of things in this journey that are there to stop you, that are there to make things difficult, that are there to drive you into the ground. There's also things that are there to help you. But the things that are there to help you tend to wait until you ask. And ask honestly, like not ask egoically. I want this because I want to be important. I want to be better. I want to be smarter. I want bigger boobs. I want a better car. It's like, no, I want this because I need to know. I need to know the answer to these things. Please help me. And again, take to heart too, Deborah, the way Native Indians have always taught me to how to pray. They taught me right from the beginning that prayer was not about asking for things. It was about saying thank you. So it's never, please heal my sick sister. It would be, thank you for the help you're bringing to my sister. Because by saying it that way, they've already acknowledged, one, it's happening. They're not asking for it. It's happened. They've said, thank you. It's already occurring. They haven't put a box around it by being specific. They just said, help. Thank you for the help you're bringing her, because maybe she needs to be sick. Maybe there's something in the sickness that's of value. There's some other help that's required right now that's important for her. So they're not putting a box around it. They're allowing this space of possibility to occur. And they're saying thank you because it's already happened. And then literally they trust that they have such faith then that the prayer has already been answered. And it's a completely different mindset of this idea of almost like, the thing we're praying to is like as equivalent of like dad having the keys to the car, and we have to act in a particular way and make dad like us so that he'll give us the keys on Saturday night. So people are spending all their time trying to please the puppeteer. So when they ask the puppeteer for the keys, he'll give them the car, as opposed to just saying the puppeteer the thing that you're praying to just wants you to be heartfelt and truthful in your wish or in the prayer you're making. And then things can happen. So
I think on a personal level for that is to walk the walk every single day, 24/7, not just on Sundays, and to have completely an attitude of gratitude.
I think that's the perfect place to leave this conversation. That is as good as you can say, because that's one of the things that I'm having a hard time with it myself. Even in the challenges, right? When you can find gratitude, even in the challenge, and find gratitude for the smallest things that are in your life, when the smallest little things, with my cat sitting on that chair over there, and I can have unbelievable gratitude and joy in that, and I don't need more than that, then the universe, you're not forcing the universe, you're not forcing reality, you're opening to it. And when you show gratitude to the smallest things, I think the universe will start opening to bigger things. But like I say, if you only, like Simon said, if you only walk the walk, you might say, for an hour a week, or when you have somebody in front of you that you want to impress, and the rest of the time you act like an idiot, well, nothing's going to happen for you. It's a lifetime journey. It's a lifetime journey of learning, of transforming, of changing, of growing, of learning, of making mistakes and getting up, rising again. And whatever powers or gifts that come to you, be thankful for them and use them in ways that truly help other people. Doing that, at the very least, something positive will come from your life, I think. So
I've got a lot to think about.
Thanks, guys, for this. This has been really, really good, actually.
Yeah, I've really, really enjoyed this. Howard, can you tell people how to find you?
Sure. get on a plane if they'll let you come to Norway and come out to the farm. We'll have a talk. I really missed that. Yeah. Thanks for showing the book. I've got, you can find, I have a website with the really strange name of Egyptian-wisdomrevealed.com. I don't really use it for much, but there are book sample chapters there. But you can track over to Amazon if you use my name, and you'll be able to see the books that are available. 3 main ones, Power of Then, Exposing the Expositions and Falling for Truth. And then there's my YouTube channel, which is Howdie Mickoski Talks, where I try to present a wide variety of the various topics that we discuss here. So if you go over there, just find the subjects that you think are the most interesting. I'm also reading my book, Falling for Truth, chapter by chapter right now, as well for people. And so go to any of those places and take a look around and see if something interests you. And by all means, if it does, get in touch and happy to discuss. And I really want to thank, because I'm being out at the reason we've done this like this with Adam and Simon together is because now that I'm at the farm, my days have gotten so busy. I have so much to do now that I haven't been prepared, that I'm trying to do sort of 2 interviews in one, just to save my time. And I just wanted to thank all of you, Adam, Debra, and Simon. You have this was a really good interview. You were well prepared. The questions were excellent. The conversation was terrific, and I'm really pleased to have done this with all of you. And I just wanted to say thank you for making a really good conversation here.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to talk to you. And I know it was a little, not a struggle, but I had to go back and forth with you a little bit to get you to agree to it. And I'm glad you finally came around, and I'm glad we did it this way because I got to meet Simon, and I never would have known him without it. I think we're going to have a friendship going on in the future together. So
super.
Absolutely. And I'd like to thank you as well, Howdie. Very much appreciated for your time. I know you're very busy. I wish you all the luck, and I wish you everything you wish yourself and your new venture in Norway. And I look forward to your upcoming books and video presentations. And anytime you come to Scotland, if I'm not here, let yourself in and start the show without me.
Thanks. And if you guys have ideas for topics or videos or subjects that you think might be interesting, please send them along, and I'm more than happy to take what you think is interesting and see if I can talk about it. So
brilliant.
It's great.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy the rest of your days, and we will catch up at some point in the future.
Okay.
All the very best.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'll talk to you all soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
And that was the Howdie Mickoski interview. My thanks to Debra and Adam from the Debra Gets Red Pilled podcast in the US of A. Very much appreciated. Thank you for having me on the show, giving me a chance to talk with you guys, and also Howdie Mickoski. My thanks to Howdie for your time. I know you're very busy. Really enjoyed talking to you. Howdie's a very interesting man. You can check Howdie out on YouTube also. His channel is Howdie Mickoski Talks. I definitely recommend looking at those videos. Such a diverse subject matter. You can also find Howdie on his website, EgyptianWisdomRevealed.com, and you can get his books on there, and I suspect Amazon also. You can find Adam and Debra's excellent podcast on most platforms, including YouTube, at Debra Gets Red Pilled. That's the name of the podcast. Brilliant. I thoroughly recommend that. You can find us on Facebook and our page on Facebook. Throw us up a like, and also here on YouTube. Subscribe if you'd be so kind. If you've got a story to share, or you just want to say hi, send me an email, the slkpodcast@gmail.com. But please keep them kind. Again, my apologies for the sound quality. It wasn't as bad as I thought, but you could tell I was sitting in my Jeep on top of the hill with the wind and the rain hitting the windscreen. But I didn't really want to lose this interview, so I'm glad that we did the interview, but I'm just sorry about the sound. So thanks for putting up with that. And so, my friends, it's time for me to go. Until we meet again and I have the pleasure of your company, take care, be happy, bye.
Slick Podcast. Keeping it real and always keeping it groovy.